Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to Internet Land. This is Funny Like a Clown Podcast. I am your host, Dennis Wirth, episode 88, December 1st, 2020, a year we will all remember, good, bad, or otherwise. As always, Funny Like a Clown Podcast is brought to you by G Vegas Buffalo Sauce for the spicy, sweet, savory taste of game time. There's only one G Vegas available at www.gvegas.webs.com. Go there, get it shipped right to your door, ready for game time. You watch the game, you gotta have a good buffalo sauce. And whether you're watching the game or you're watching comedy or you're doing it all, I have on the phone, I want to say a Boston comedian, but he really gets around, so we'll just say a veteran comedian. Thomas Hayes, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dennis, great to be here. You really have a sponsor?
Yeah, we go big time here with buffalo sauce. Come on, you got a buffalo sauce or sauce, so why not, right?
Is buffalo sauce okay in Boston?
Yeah, do you like buffalo sauce, Tom?
So really, I'm just curious. Let me interview you for a second. How did you get a sponsor? That's very impressive.
Well, I did the cooking show for a while, so I mean, which I had you on as a guest a couple times. Then from there, I made some connections in the food industry, and then one thing led to another, and buffalo sauce it is. So
Oh, fantastic. And then,
I got a lot of friends like you. You got a lot of friends in the comedy world, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I don't know. I was kind of surprised by the fact that you would want to do a podcast about comedy. When do you think that there's going to be any comedy when we get through with this?
I think this is what comedy's become. It's become an internet thing here after this virus because there's not many live shows going on, and if there is, there ain't many people in them. It's a new world. I mean, how long have you been doing comedy for? That's the first question.
I started. That's a great question because I never, ever, ever thought that I would be a comedian. That was never in my mindset. You hear a lot of guys, I was in grammar school and, I was always the class clown.
Not you?
Well, listen, I grew up in Roxbury, Massachusetts, which was an ethnic neighborhood of which I was a minority. And there was violence on the streets. There was violence in the school. Went to parochial school. Incredible violence in the school, and not from the students, from the nuns whacking kids around. Physically, yeah. Right. It wasn't funny at the time. It's funny now, but at the time, it was pretty bad. And in the house, we grew up in a blue collar neighborhood. And in those days, you sounded off or you acted up. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Sounded off or acted up. Then you got a whack.
Not like nowadays where the kids run the world, they get away with everything, right? So it was a different day and age back then.
You knew that might makes right. And you learned to understand and respect that. Whether, people want to debate whether, that's not the way to bring up a kid. Even the thought of trying to be funny, you just weren't going to get away with it.
Right.
And not only that, it just never entered my mind. In fact, the only comedians that I liked were rare. I mean, first of all, comedy was such a rare thing back then. You had a few greats. You had like Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
And then after that, George Carlin came along, but
it didn't have the platform it has today. That's for sure. Back then,
yeah, you had TV.
Johnny Carson, right?
You had Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah.
But you didn't have a lot of. You'd see a stand-up once in a while on the Ed Sullivan Show. In fact, I'm glad we're talking about this because I saw Rodney. I turned some people on to Rodney. Isn't it interesting that we're leading into a generation that won't even know who Rodney is or was?
He gets no respect.
Still, except, I got to take that back. They do know what Caddyshack is.
Yeah.
So anyway, I saw him. Somebody sent me a clip of him roasting Reagan, and he was on his game. He was so tight, so fast, and then somebody I saw another video clip of him maybe 10 years prior, and he was not the same Rodney. He was slow. You know, he'd deliver a line, and he'd wait for a response. And it was just, and he did well, but it wasn't Rodney. You could see how he had honed his craft.
Right.
So, you know, it's interesting how comedy's evolved. And so in 35 years, I never thought I'd be a comedian. I didn't see any comedians that I said, wow, I want to be that.
Be like him. So 35 years, that's how long you've been doing it?
What's that?
35 years, that's how long you've been doing comedy?
Yeah, at least. Probably. And I fell into it. I was born, you know, without getting too woo-woo here, I'm a big believer in destiny. I think we all come here with a certain game plan. And if you just pay attention, it's going to happen. And when I look back, I was born into a family of a great Italian family. I'm half Irish, half Italian. And the Italians were great parlor game, parlor tricks, and magicians, amateur magicians. And then one of them went on to become a professional magician, but he had moved to California, so I didn't have much contact with him. But my cousins would teach me magic tricks. And so for a few years, I got into that, and, you know, I gravitated toward that.
That'd be like family gatherings. You do that, like an Italian family. You get together for like a family gathering, and all of a sudden a show would break out into self just in the living room, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, there was celebrations. I mean, that's a whole other podcast. But so I never looked on the TV and said, oh, you know, I want to be, you know, any one of those guys. In fact, most comedians were punchline guys. You know, boom, boom.
One-liners, yeah.
Except for the Law. Now, the Law and Hardy, I just thought was insanely, and still is today, probably the purest form of team comedy. But so there was nothing to emulate as far as I saw, and but I was so for 8-10 years I did what everybody else does. You go to college and one day as a salesman, I asked the guy my boss to come down and talk to an account to see if we could close it. He took out a magic trick, and he sold the account using the magic trick, and I was like horrified because this was a radiologist who, you know, they're the creme de la creme of physicians, and I'm thinking, how the heck is he going to pull this off? But he did. The guy laughed.
Right. Making people comfortable, right?
Yeah, but exactly. And I was a little bit of a fact. Like I had the same effect that he did, that trick. I had held on to it, and I went up into the cellar, grabbed it, and I thought I was going to be rich. I thought I was going to go out and close every single account I made a presentation.
With a magic trick.
But what happened was the clients said, that's a good trick. Now, again, these are radiologists. These are the creme de la creme. These are guys with about 30 years of education. They are board certified. They've gone way beyond what a normal, even surgeon does. And they would just be fascinated that I could trick them because they made their living seeing. And so they demanded that I keep doing magic tricks for them.
They wanted to figure one out, right? I'm going to figure one of these out.
And then it became a form of nepotism in a way, because they say, listen, my kid's having a birthday party this weekend. If you come and do the birthday party, I think I could swing some business your way.
Oh, geez, it became
so
a side
I started
act.
performing in cellars. Now here's the big woo-woo, okay?
Yeah.
So I got, all of a sudden, at 28 or 30, I stopped taking magic, in earnest, and I'm getting pretty good. And so at the same time, cable TV comes out, and at the same time, video cameras come out. Those big bulky things which used to have to strap the
like a car battery goes in one of them.
Shoulders. Yeah, remember that phase?
Yeah,
anyway, yeah. I'm doing a magic show one night, and I gravitated toward comedy magic. And somebody brought a camera and recorded this bit. And it turned out that the guy I brought up as the subject was hysterical. He was drunk, and he was hysterical. And it made a 5-minute bit absolutely fall off your seat, funny.
Right.
And again, it wasn't me so much as it was my reaction to him and whatever. Anyway, so I've got this video, and all of a sudden I'm subscribing to cable, and Showtime Cable comes along and announces that they're going to have a contest for funniest person in America. And so they send in a video. So I throw a video in the mail as a total long shot.
Right.
Thinking I don't stand a prayer, but why not?
Well, what made you gravitate toward putting comedy into your act, mixing magic and acting together? Was it just an unconscious decision, or?
Yeah, again, I'm just following. Things are popping into my reality and into my universe, and I'm just following them.
All right.
I obviously have an affinity for these things. That's just. I think every comedian inside of. I talk to most comedians, and most comedians say we all want to be Peter Pan.
Yeah.
And in fact, that when I saw Peter Pan with Mary Martin, and they used to do it live, and I saw it, and I said, as soon as I got the concept of who Peter Pan was, and it'd never grow up, I just went, that's what I want to be.
Be a kid forever. Who don't want to be a kid forever?
I want to play for the rest of my life. And basically, as a comedian, that's what we are. Are we not?
So you send in the movie tape, and what happens? You hear from them, or?
Yeah, so I send it in, and now you got to remember, this is the year that Ellen DeGeneres won she won the national award.
Title, right? Yeah.
Okay, so I throw it in, and they were giving out state awards and then national awards. So I throw it in, and and now I figured they were going to make the decision based just on the videotape, but no, that's not what happens. Now you got to remember, this is in the heyday of Boston comedy. This is 1984, 85, whatever.
Comedy boom. That's when comedy went nuts.
Well, I mean, and let's just go over a few of the characters on the scene. Paula Poundstone, Stephen Wright, Jay Leno, Bobcat Goldthwait, never mind Steve Sweeney, never mind Lenny Clark, never mind Don Gavin, never mind on and on and on.
So those are legends of today, but back then they were just regular comics, right?
Yeah, but there were 4 comedy centers in the country. There was Boston. Now again, this just happened. I mean, out of nowhere, Boston blossomed. It started over in Cambridge at a Chinese restaurant called the Ding Ho.
Ding Ho, legendary.
Guys. Yeah, and so they went over there, Sweeney, Lenny, Gavin, and the same Frank Salamina, all of these cats were getting national attention. I mean, Stephen Wright's performing one night, and Freddie DeCorda from The Tonight Show walks in, and the next thing you know, Stephen Wright is a major force in comedy, selling out theaters and concert halls all over the country.
So you were part of the Ding Ho days then? You were there when they got the call from The Tonight Show, they were sending somebody to look at you guys? Were you there then?
Yeah, I was. Well, no. Here's the funny part. I had never been in a comedy club. When I threw that video in, I was self-established as a magician. I was getting paid very well, and I was working for Knights of Columbus, for Elks Halls, for business meetings,
like company meetings and stuff, right?
Yeah, and again, most of the magic was pretty funny. I mean, I did some pretty sophisticated stuff. That was pretty solid magic, but I shifted it quickly to audience participation, fun laugh. And so all of a sudden, Showtime Cable is going around the country setting up audition spots in major cities. And they came to Boston, and for almost a year, they milked this thing. They went to every single comedy club, the Comedy Connection, Nick's, Dick Doherty had a place at that point. Catch a Rising Star was here. Stitches. There were 7 comedy clubs.
Talent search of the time, kind of like the American Idol of the time, looking for the next American Idol town to town, right?
Look, and then not only that, I remember seeing on TV one night they had a huge stage set up in Quincy Market, and there's Stephen Wright on stage. There's Gavin. There's Sweeney. There's all these guys. And I'm going, well, forget that. I'm not going to win this. And so a year goes by, and now they've decided to hold a national runoff. And I'm saying, I'm not going down to New York to get on stage and get massacred by those guys.
Right.
And I get a phone call, and it's like, Tom Hayes, this is Showtime Cable. And I didn't believe them. They said, congratulations. What are you talking about?
So one of my friends pulling a joke on me. This ain't for real, right?
Yeah, they go, you won, the funniest person in Massachusetts. And I'm like, and I'm fighting with them. I'm going, no. I only sent them the video. I didn't go to, yeah, we know. I said, yeah, but you went around Massachusetts, Boston for over a year and had all these shows and all those, I know those guys. And you're telling me I won. Yeah, you won.
Over all those legends, you pulled it out on a videotape, huh?
Yeah, and the thing was hysterical. But again, it wasn't so much me as it was the dude I picked out.
Right.
Antics he went through, and me. The funniest part was me trying to control him because he was drunk.
One of those magic moments you happen to catch on tape, right?
Yeah, so now Showtime Cable has got me doing press conferences. I'm on TV. I'm being interviewed as the funniest person, and the whole time I'm,
wow,
pooping my pants, going, I'm not the guy.
That's a dream everybody dreams of, and it actually happened to you. Wow.
Yeah, but so this is when I say fate jumps in when we least expect it.
Right, you never know, right?
Well, and all of a sudden, now here's the thing is, I was making so much money as a comedian, and I had a pretty good day job. The whole thing of the open mic concept, to me, was laughable. Because I'd see, at that time, all of those clubs were mobbed during 7 nights a week, 2 shows a night at least, and on the weekends, 4 or 5 shows a night in each venue.
Wow.
Mobbed, lines after
couldn't
lines
get enough,
to go in. And I saw the money they were making. And yet the comedians were working for free. And so, I wasn't going to go through that. I didn't have to.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, the Comedy Connection calls me one day. He goes, we saw the bit in the paper, you won. Did you know somebody? Because I knew that I was not a force. I go, no. I said, I don't believe it either. But I said, well, would you come down to the club? Because they were going to milk it.
Of course. They can make money off you.
Yeah. So now I walk into the clubs getting paid pretty good money right from the shop.
Oh, they were willing to pay you. Wow.
Yeah, well, because I had a credit.
Yeah, you got a television credit. Yeah, you're definitely getting paid,
yeah.
Sure.
So, so that was it. All of a sudden, through no intention of mine, no plan.
You're a working comedian.
I'm on stage at the Comedy Connection at Nick's, and I'm doing okay. I'm getting tons of laughs.
So what was it like? I mean, comedy's addictive. When you get a few laughs, you can't wait to get a few more. I mean, did it start to get addictive for you?
Yeah, it was, excuse the pun, but it was magical. But again, none of this was planned.
Planned, right, yeah.
It happened. And, and it's been a beautiful, wonderful ride until now.
35 years later.
And not just, I'm going to get a little realistic, let's say here. And not just until now. I mean, before COVID even, let's be honest, it is not like it was.
Well, what's the biggest difference you see? You've been around 35 years. I mean, I hear that from a lot of the veteran comics. Comedy back in the day was so much, different than comedy is today. What are some of the bigger differences you've seen in comedy?
Well, first of all, it doesn't hold the, let's just talk the venues. In the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, there were 7 comedy clubs in the city of Boston. 7.
Right.
With lines in front of them every single night. And on the weekends, 4 and 5 shows. I used to have to try to push my way into the Knicks or the Comedy Connection and explain to people I was one of the acts, because people are looking at me thinking I was trying to cut the line.
Right.
And and there were 30 comedy clubs in the suburbs. I could easily work every single night.
Right.
At least 1 or 2 shows.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first difference. That doesn't exist anymore. Second of all, when you got into the club, or you went, to me, some of the scariest times and some of the most fascinating times was watching Paula Poundstone or Bobcat Goldthwait or Sweeney or Gavin or over and over, amazing Kenny Rogerson. I mean, we're talking geniuses, and just being in awe of what was being presented to the world, and the world recognizing it. You know, offering these guys all kinds of, I can't even go, Teddy Bergeron is another one, genius. I mean, these guys were on, you put on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and there was a Boston comic at least once a week.
Yeah, it became a mecca. Boston was a mecca for putting on comedians, yeah.
Yeah, and so let's just look at the venues. We have, one venue, and that's Laugh Boston, and that's not really a local club, that's a national club. But what else do we have?
It turned into bowling alleys, turned into comedy clubs, and
there you go.
restaurants turned into comedy clubs.
You just answered the question.
Yeah.
You just answered the question.
So do you think that was bad for comedy? I mean...
Yeah, I mean, because, well, think of it, first of all, to get any stage time at those venues, I mean, you're competing with national people who were self-grown.
Right.
I mean, you know, we're looking at Boston, Conan O'Brien, you know, Jay Leno, you know, and all of the others, and you got to be good.
Yeah, because Giggles is in a pizza shop, Kowloon's in a Chinese food restaurant. I mean, most of the major clubs are in restaurants.
Another name that came up, Jimmy Tingle, and you know, these are national guys who were on national TV.
Right.
And that's the second layer, isn't it? So the venues, but then the talent. And, you know, I don't mean to slight anybody, but let's be honest. We don't have that caliber of talent.
Yeah, there's more kids that want to be a comedian than... Everybody wants to headline their first week in the business, too. Nobody really wants to pay their dues anymore.
Yeah. So, you know, it became, instead of racing to the club, you couldn't wait to see who was in lineup that night.
Right.
And just, you know, laughing as a comic, just going, oh my God, these guys are so funny. And they would make me laugh to today where, you know, I sit and you know, when we were, and I go, oh my God, you know, this is not good.
It's painful. Some nights are painful. Yeah, every night's different than others. Yeah.
Yeah. And what happened, you know, it was an interesting phenomenon. I saw it happen. See, all of a sudden, a few guys, and I won't mention names, even though, you know, his initials are DD, he decided that he was going to monetize this thing in a different way. Rather than put 3 headliners, or 4 headliners, or 5 headliners up a night, he was taking it to the suburbs and decided, well, all I have to do is put up 1 headliner, and I'll put an open micer and a middle act, and, you know, that'll be showing I can make a ton of money because I don't have to pay 3 or 4 headliners. Well,
then you're hurting the show.
The people started to notice.
Right.
Hey, this isn't what it was. And all of a sudden, it's harder to fill a room.
That's your standard comedy show now. You got your opener, your middler, and your headliner. Where.
Yeah, so all of a sudden, people aren't getting the bang for their buck that they were. They notice.
Yeah.
And so, and then it got even worse. You know, a lot of comics, you know, they're getting new guys. So what do they go for the cheap laugh. They go for the, you know, the language. They go below the belt.
Right.
It becomes, the comedy becomes blue. And, you know, I had to explain this to a booker recently before this whole thing fell down. He said to me, well, you know, I'm starting to figure out I don't have to pay 3 headliners, and I can get, you know, a couple of open micers that want free, and I'll just have to pay the headliner, and I can make and you can probably tell by the way I'm talking who I'm talking about.
Right.
And I said to him, well, he had a venue inside a hotel, a very nice hotel. And I said, well, you know something, do that. Why don't you just do that? Why don't you just go the route that everybody else did? And I said, you know that clientele you have? I said, you know, guys, you know, in their 50s and 60s, and their wives. The guy comes in and he doesn't come in jeans and a sweatshirt and a baseball cap. He comes in
dress code,
dressed business casual. It's a Saturday night, and he's got his wife with him. She's all dolled up, and she's got on jewelry, and she's and she's this is a special night for her. And they don't order beer; they order cosmopolitans and cocktails, and they sit there. So you're going to now introduce people with a blue act and F out of their mouth every other word, and you think that guy's going to feel like that he's treating his wife to a special
they
night.
walk the room, Well, without mentioning names, the guy you're talking about, I think back in the day he was up to like 14 or 15 rooms, and when he finally retired, he was down to 2. So, I don't think it really worked out for him all that well.
Right, exactly. So I said, so your clientele, if they have any discernment at all, they're not going to come to your show. And so, again, it's kind of like what's happening all over the world. I'm sitting here right now in South Boston, and what they did was it's all about the buck. It's all about greed, and it's just get in the place with apartments and condos and get as much money as you can. We won't pay attention to distinction or class or quality. So a long answer to your question, but there's a difference between 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2020. So it happened before COVID. It's getting harder and harder. It was getting harder and harder to fill a room.
Yeah.
And there are no clubs, really.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the dirty comedy. We grew up, Eddie Murphy in the 80s, he was a filthy act, and he was selling out arenas and stuff to these kids. That's what the kids were looking for, so that's what they're emulating. But now, like you said, when you go to your local Knights of Columbus, now you got a family in there, they don't want to hear that stuff. So what you're seeing on TV is what makes you want to do comedy, but you can't really do that on the local scene, can you?
Oh, exactly. Well, you can, but it's going to impact the market. So what we're doing, all of us were doing before COVID hit, was we're traveling further and further.
All over New England.
You have to travel to Maine or to whatever, Connecticut, and then you get on stage, and they didn't, and it's a benefit. People didn't even pay,
right?
And you do your thing, and you can have a good set, but there's no consistency. People aren't. I think this is. I decided. I analyzed everything, and when I figure, here is the psychology, what used to be with a comedy club, okay? People made a commitment. People just didn't sit around on a Friday and say, hey, let's run down to the comedy club and catch some comedy. No, they had to, talk to their significant other or whatever and say, what's the plan? Hey, why don't we go to a comedy club? Okay, so because there was such a demand, a lot of times you had to call and make a reservation.
Not anymore, right?
No. So what they had to do was, they had to make a psychological commitment to go there. Okay, we're going there. Psychological commitment. Second of all, they had to make a financial commitment. They had to say, call up and get tickets, put a reservation in. And they had to have a reservation. You didn't have a reservation, you weren't going.
Right.
So now they've made a financial commitment. Now, on the night of the show, they're making a physical commitment to get in the car and drive to this place, to be entertained, to laugh. Now
you got their full attention now.
Already, they are ready.
Right.
They are ready. Okay. What we've got today is, we're going to hold a benefit for the fire department, and guess what? You got 3 tickets.
Yeah.
And,
nobody's invested in the show now, right?
It's free, and what can you say? You don't make any commitments other than driving there. And the thing in your mind is, how good could these guys be? We didn't have to pay to see them.
Free show, right? Well, the young comics do that. They can't get paid. So if you're not going to pay me, I'll put on my own show. That's how I'll get time. Then people are going and seeing these kids. They're not laughing, and they're thinking, "This is comedy. I'm not coming back."
Exactly. So what they did was what happens with most brands. You got a nice brand, and then all of a sudden it becomes a commodity. And so people see all over the place comedy. They go to it and they go, I ain't going after that brand anymore. I went there and it was a waste of my. No, I didn't have to pay any money, but it was a total waste of my time.
Right.
You know, so there's where we are. There's where we came from, and there's where we are.
Well, there's a lot of online things too. Like they have online things where you can hire a comedian, and these kids are going on, and you know they don't know nothing. You know, people hiring a comic, they don't know who's who. They hire a comic, and they hire one of these young kids, and no laughs.
It became with Gig Salad and Gig Master. It became a game of price.
Right.
You know, I did it for a bit. You know, people come in, well, I can get somebody for this price, and I can get. And I'm going, go ahead. But do you know what you're getting for that
what's
price?
The quality of the show, right?
Yeah. You know, hey, when you go to the hospital and get some brain surgery, do you ask for the cheapest doctor?
Good point.
So, yeah, so what has happened is it went from going to the club hoping to hear headliners who were not only performing in Boston, but were performing on national TV and all over the country, all over the world, to somebody who, you know, just kind of...
I'm going to do it cheaper.
Like you said it. Yeah. So I think, you know, comedians have done this to themselves.
Right. Drove the product into the ground. Well, because you said back in the day there were only a handful of comedians. Nowadays, it's so big, everybody wants to be a comedian. It's watered down the market, and it's made it so competitive. It's become a dirty business. But why do you think it's like that? Why do you think, like, if you work for one guy, you can't work for another guy? If you work that room, you can't work that room?
Oh my God, that's the other thing.
Why is it like that?
Oh my God, you know, it's funny because of what, again, I had a situation in my life that, at the age of 13, I came down with a form of cancer that, if 100 kids got it, 95 died. So I'm a living miracle. All right?
Yeah, you really overcame. Yeah, they say laughter's the best medicine. I mean,
yeah,
you're battling cancer at 13. Did you use laughter to get through it, or?
Well, in my mind, there was no doubt that I would make it, but the statistics were totally against me.
Against you, right?
And again, you know, 100 kids get it, 95 died. I was one of the 5. And so I kind of believe in things that aren't just tangible. I think that there's an intangible aspect to life, and you can call it whatever it is. I don't want to get into theology or anything else, but you know, I think that, just like I said before, that we have a certain destiny, a certain guiding principle, and
all here for a reason.
You know, yeah. So, but the thing, you know, we're talking about. Yes, there were a lot of comics. There weren't. You're saying there weren't as many comics? No, there were. You went into Nick's comedy collection at night. There were 20 or 30 comedians in there dying to get time, but they were good.
Right.
They were really good.
Now you'd have over 100.
Yeah, you had this explosion. It was the golden age of comedy for Boston that just happened, and not only for Boston, but all over the country. Saturday Night Live was funny then. You know, it's pretty it's pretty worked out right now. But anyway, so again, you just had an explosion. It happened at a certain time. I think it was meant to happen. And now it's everybody trying to get whatever they're trying to get, and it's not going over.
It's just too competitive now, right? There's too much competition, I guess.
Well, but see, it's competitive in numbers, but not in quality.
Quality, right? Yeah.
You know, I mean,
they're not always going for the quality, though. You know, like you said, money's an issue, so you don't always go for the quality. You're going for the cheap buck.
Well, I mean, you know, Don Gavin. There was no one funnier than Don Gavin.
The Godfather.
You know, I mean, no one. Robin Williams. You know,
right.
No one. Jay Leno. No one. Quicker or funnier than that mind. And so for some. And for somebody to think that they can, you know, get up on stage and compete with that, you know, you just, you know, that's.
Well, that's the problem. Guys like that never retire, though. I mean, he's still doing it at his age, and I mean, there's not a window for the next guy because the guy doing it, you do it till the day you die. So, You know,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
the
And
young guy coming up. How do I get in? I got to do a cheaper show. Is the only way he can get his foot in the door, because you're not going to outperform a guy like that.
well, and then what you've done is, if you can't hone your act and create, I mean, this is a great. I'm having a great time doing this. I hope you're enjoying it, because now let's take a look at what evolved from Boston. Well, let's look at it. Didn't end, and we're going to talk about the guys who didn't possess the talent at the time but stayed with it. I mean, this is where the craft of comedy comes in. Louis C.K., who by his own demise took himself from the top to oblivion, but I have to give him credit. Now, Louis, at best, was a middle act. Even in the time he became a national act, he was at best in Boston. He could have never followed the people I just mentioned.
Right.
Okay, but this is the difference between what you're saying, the people who are the ground feeders, people who are go for the, I got to give away a show, I got to give it. Yeah. Well, Louis decided to brand himself. Louis went to New York, and in spite of all the difficulties, worked and worked and worked. And all of a sudden, he found a niche. He found his people.
He connected with the young kids. I know, like Conan O'Brien, the young kids love him to death, and I'd just assume see the David Letterman and the Jay Leno, but it's what generation you were brought up in, I guess. These young kids, they connect to different stuff than we were brought up on, that's for sure.
Yeah, so they followed, and what did he do? He got a television show, and then he did movies. So kudos to Louis. He stuck with it, and he burned himself. Now let's go again. Boston act, all right, that made it to the top. Bill Burr. Let's talk about Bill Burr.
I thought he crushed it on Saturday Night Live. He caught a lot of flack, but I thought he had a killer set. I thought he did what he wanted to do.
He was going to get flack. That's the part we haven't talked about
yet.
Yeah,
everything's offensive now. Everything is offensive, yeah.
That's the other part we haven't talked about. What is the future of comedy in a society where everybody's offended?
You can't say nothing anymore and somebody's offended.
That's right, because everybody's offended. So Bill Burr goes the same route as Louis C.K. He continues to work it again. He was not even close to being a headliner in Boston.
Right.
But he was Boston bred, and he knew what was the best, and he knew what he would have to do to emulate that. He had to be smart. He had to be quick. He had to be brash. He had to do that. He had to brand himself. And so after 20 years, he's not an overnight success, and all of a sudden he's at the top of the game.
He outworked everybody else. Yeah.
Right, and he's got balls. And the best of all, when you're talking about people being offended by it, in fact, guess what? Bill Burr is kryptonite. Nobody can go after him.
Yeah.
You know why?
He's too big now.
You know why he's kryptonite? You know why he's impenetrable? He's married to a black woman.
What are you gonna say, right?
So nobody can just say to him he's got white male privilege.
But I mean, I do too. It gets to the point where no matter what you say, someone's going to be offended, so you don't even try. I mean, that's what I do. I say it. If you're offended, that's on you, not me. I mean, no matter what you say, what are you going to do?
But isn't it sad? I was doing cruise ships up until COVID hit. I got fired from the cruise ship line because I was doing material about my disability.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, they had to put up a disclaimer around the ship when they did hire me back. Mr. Hayes does material about his disability, which some people find offensive or uncomfortable. So if you feel that way, please don't go to the show.
Wow.
And then I had to...
That's what they say to do, is make fun of yourself. That way you're not making fun of nobody else, don't they?
Yeah, I had to do a disclaimer before I go on. Just to let people know here, I was thrown off this ship because I did some material about myself that people found offensive or uncomfortable. So I want to tell you, if this is your time, if you feel that that's going to happen, imagine before a comedy show, you're going to make a disclaimer. So if you're going to be offended, you might want to... And also, I may drift into...
That sets the mood for the night, don't it? Jeez.
But if I do, it's not intentional, so just raise your hands. And I'll be happy to go to someplace else so that you're not offended. Imagine that we have to do that before we start a comedy show.
Yeah, you gotta Well, there's a lot of benefit shows too, where if you're doing something for cancer and someone will come up and they'll start crying. I lost my sister to cancer. Thank you for showing up. It's the most painful time of my life, and here's Tom to make you laugh. It's like, well, thanks for setting the tone there for me. Jeez, then you got to dig yourself out of that hole, So.
Right. Well, exactly. But so it's like it isn't like the good old days. You went up and did your stuff and tried to express yourself. It's like there's a minefield out there. You got all these sensitive people.
Yeah, we weren't offended by nothing back in the day. Now it's a whole new game. It's changing comedy a lot.
Yeah, and so hey, a friend asked me to do a storytelling night one night. I hope he listens to this show because we've never really addressed it. And not to do comedy per se, but to do storytelling. And it was in a coffee house, and I basically volunteered to do it. And I got there, and I noticed something weird about the coffee house because everybody was on their computers or devices, phones, whatever. And I realized it was predominantly millennial audience.
Right.
And so I sensed a problem with that. And so it was kind of like the moth that PBS does, where people get up and tell humorous stories. So I did my story, and in it, one of the captains was Bobby Seibel. Did you ever know Bobby?
Yeah, I had Bobby on my TV show once. Yeah, and I did.
The most incredible character ever to come out of Boston in terms of the comedic character.
He walked in the room, and his energy just lit up the room. Bobby was great. I love Bobby.
Oh, so Bobby, we were in Prague together, and Bobby made a remark that was very funny. And it wasn't my remark, it was Bobby's. And I noticed a few people closed their computers and left, and I didn't know why. And then afterwards, I went up to somebody who was drawing in a moleskin, and I said, hey, can I see your sketches? And I was there to compliment them. Boy, those are great. You're going to do a graphic novel? What are you going to do with those? He goes, hey, man, that expression you use, man, that might have been okay 20 years ago, man, but that doesn't work today, man. And I said to him, well, I warned the comic that, I said, if anybody attacks me for my political correctness anymore, shame on them because it won't be pretty. And so I said, why don't you tell somebody who gives an F?
Yeah.
And I said, second of all, I said, do you realize what you're doing? I says, it is this kind of stuff that is pushing. I said, my politics was mostly to the left. I said, but every time you broach this stuff and tell people you're offended and what they can say and what they can't say, you keep pushing people to the right. Well, all of a sudden, the manager of the place, herself a millennial, comes up and says, you got to leave.
Really?
And I said, I'm leaving. And so I'm walking out. But I'm being a little prick. I'm not going.
You're not entitled to your opinion, I guess, right?
Yeah. So she's saying, you got to go faster. And so I lift up my pant leg to show my prosthesis. I said, I'm going as fast as I can. Guess what? The next is who does this generation hate more than anybody right now? And it begins with a P and it ends with an E. Police. They hate the police. Yeah. Well, guess what? They do. 3 words to get me to move faster. Call
the police.
Police. Why? Because the comic used a naughty word.
Huh.
And so they called the police to get me out of there.
Where? They actually called them? Yeah.
They called the police. This is, to me, I don't know about, I hate to get a little political, but this sounds like 1930s Germany to me.
Yeah, everybody needs to think the way they want them to nowadays.
Yeah, he used a word that we don't agree with, so we got to call the police.
Oh, yeah.
And this is free speech.
Everything Lenny Bruce fought for, they're tearing down, right?
I went there with the intention to entertain.
Yeah, I had that. I did some political humor early on in my career, and it riled up the crowd, and I cut that from my act real quick. I'm like, man, don't touch politics. That'll stir people up really, really crazy.
Right. So I think we're at a crossroads, and what is going to happen afterward? Are people going to finally say, hey, gee, why don't we just let our guard down? Why don't we have some fun? A comic called me the other day, and he's thinking of doing something pretty different for the comedy thing, and he said to me, you know, nobody wants to have any fun anymore.
Yeah.
I goes, there you go. So how do we as comics perform in a world where everybody's on their guard, everybody's waiting for the wrong thing, and comedy doesn't contain the quality that it used to? How are we to move forward? I think this is a real amazing juncture.
It's a dangerous time. Yeah, it's become a thinking man's game, I guess. Where, like you said before, it was just have fun. Now you can't have fun anymore. You got to think about it.
Yeah.
Strange time for the world.
I'd like to think. I think, I think the wise. If you've got a talent for being funny, I think what's going to have to happen, you're going to have to find different venues. Like, for example, I started writing funny stories, and I'm going to do it through maybe a screenplay, maybe this or that, but I'll find a way of expressing, what I feel inside to be funny, and with the intention of making people laugh. But I won't have to stand up in a crowd being judged.
Yeah. Well, it's going to the internet now. They can turn you off. Or a live show, they can't turn you off. If you're coming at them through the internet, they can turn you off if they're offended, I guess.
Right. Exactly. But I wonder even how many people are going to comedy for their entertainment right now. Again, how much of it is good stuff? I mean, I think Burr is a genius, and I loved what he did on Saturday Night Live because he told the truth.
Oh, sure, yeah, he didn't hold back. He caught some heat for it, though. He didn't get off scot-free. The next day, there were a lot of people complaining.
Of course he did, because they were offended.
Of course, yeah. He didn't care. He did what he thought was funny. You like it, you like it. You don't, but he probably got more publicity for for being bad, for offending people than if he had just did a clean set.
But he told the truth.
Right.
He told the truth, and they didn't want to hear the truth.
Oh no, they don't want to hear the truth nowadays. That's the truth.
It's okay for them. It's okay for them as long as they're bashing.
Oh yeah. And, as long as you agree with their points, okay.
Right. Who are you? I mean, let's face it. He picked on 3 of the sacred cows. I mean, nobody would dare go after the groups that he went after. Race,
religion, and disease. Those are the big 3 you don't touch, but he goes after them.
Well, he went after white women who had the nuts to do that.
Right.
It's okay to go after white males, but to go after white women and just nail them. He said, oh, you didn't have trouble. The white guys were all the bad guys and made all that nasty, dirty money, but you didn't have a problem sucking up the blood money.
You're living on the blood money, right? Yeah. Well.
And then he went after gay pride.
Yeah.
And it says, like you said, he's kryptonite. He says, and he went right where the phone. He says, hey, you guys weren't slaves.
Yeah, I mean, he's big enough now, even if he catches, he's got his built-in audience that love him, so he can say what he wants, where...
Oh, exactly. He's gaining. And the more, he's like Trump, and Trump just loves to get everybody excited and mad, and the more he gets...
Yeah, I mean, if a new comic went on and did that exact same routine, you'd never hear from him again, because he don't have the following Bill Burr has,
Exactly. Well, I went to a comedian's wedding about 3 years ago, and all of a sudden Burr came up at the table, and at the table was Lenny, and there was Gavin, and all of the big names, and somebody brought up Bill Burr, Dave, oh God, what's his last name? Right now, escape me. Dave Russo. Dave Russo said, it's obvious that Bill has got fuck you money.
Yeah, right.
Bill doesn't care.
He made his name on that Karen, right?
He's probably worth 50 or 60 million at least right now. And he said, he can get away. He doesn't care.
You can get away with it, yeah. I mean, on the local scene, you can't. They'll judge you every which way or sideways. It's we used to be able to get away with that in the local scene, but now we can't anymore. I mean,
it's just let me ask you: how much fun is it knowing that you can't generate fun because so many people are waiting to be hurt.
Yeah, you got to find your audience. You got to find your following. I mean, when I
Well,
started out,
it
you
was
had to be careful. I mean,
interesting. A comic sent me a clip of Don Rickles hosting Saturday Night Live, and let's face it, Don Rickles, everything he did was racist.
for the time, he was edgy. For the time, yeah. I mean, nowadays it'd probably be mild, but I mean, for the time, it was like, he was the.
Well, they wouldn't let him. They wouldn't let him get away with it. At the time, you know what the difference was? Everybody. It was a way. Somebody talked the other day about Archie Bunker.
I was just gonna say, imagine if Archie Bunker was around nowadays. They'd take him off the air in 2 seconds. Yeah.
Well, but you see, somebody commented it was great because it was a time for America to address race and to laugh at ourselves, at the stupidity of the stereotypes and the stupidity of the closed minds. So when Archie Bunker, this brute of a mind, was dealing with these things, and then the networks were smart. They came out with the Jeffersons to do the black side of the thing, and it was all racist, but it brought it forward in a comedic way where people could laugh at ourselves.
That was what the race was the thing of the time. Right, everybody was dealing with it.
Nobody can laugh at themselves.
Yeah. It's not as big as an issue now, so now people get offended by it because we're past that time.
They can't see the humor to it. They can't relax and laugh at yourself. Instead, they're offended.
They take too much of it serious. They don't realize it's a joke, right?
So, where are we going? I don't know what
what the future holds.
Right. When people finally say, hey, look, we got through a pandemic. It was difficult times. Why don't we just go out and have a good time? I would love to see that.
Yeah, that would be nice to see, but who knows if we could do it at our age. The young kids, not so much. But I mean, other than comedy, you've seen a lot in comedy, but you've done other things in comedy. I mean, it says you're a competitive athlete. I mean, getting through that at 13 with what you overcame, how did you become a professional athlete?
Well,
a competitive athlete, I guess.
The thing that I wanted to do more than anything was ski. And again, destiny stepped in. I didn't even think that was... Well, first of all, the doctor told me, here's a doctor in his 50s, a world-renowned surgeon, Mass General, Harvard-trained, tells me he's going to take my leg off at the age of 13. And, of course, I was traumatized. So I started asking him, what could I do? Would I be able to walk? First thing I said, can I run? And he said, no, you can't. I was very fast. Growing up in Rockford, I had to be very fast because I had to run most of my childhood. But second of all, I said, can I walk? He said, yeah. And then I had just received a brand new bicycle, and I just loved being on a bike. And I said, can I ride a bike? And he told me, in no uncertain terms, impossible. Don't even try it. If you do, you could fall on the side. They had to remove my leg at the hip. So they were afraid that if I fell on the left side, I would hit my head and die or whatever. He says, you'll die, so don't even try it. Well, 3 months later, I drove the bicycle into his office. And
you weren't taking no for an answer then?
Yeah, well, it was desire. I wanted to get on it, and I got on it.
Right.
And I took the chance. And, that was a turning point in my life because I realized when somebody said, I talked to inner city schools for 5th graders, and I always tell them, if somebody tells you that you can't do something, they're lying to you because they have no idea what you're capable of. So that was the rule breaker for me, was to learn that this guy, even though he's brilliant and he saved my life and he's world-renowned, he didn't know me.
He wasn't you, right?
He didn't understand what
who
desire
you are, right?
and persistence would do. So I became equally as fast with one leg as all the other kids. So I had a certain athletic. And the other thing I wanted to do was learn to ski, but I didn't think that was possible until I saw they had these, what they call, at the time. This became my act. This is what got me thrown off the ships.
Yeah.
They came up with this concept of handicap skiing. And, of course, then I had to bring it current and say, oh, that was in the day. That was before PC. And I said, so the term handicap skiing didn't last long because I said, guess what was happening was the handicapped people were getting a little offended. So what they were doing is they were going down into the inner city and beating up white people. And they were tipping over cars and throwing Molotov cocktails and looting. And I said, so they decided they better change it from handicapped to disabled. I've asked the audience, do you know what the next thing is? oh, it's disabled. I said, well, let's get away from this handicap thing. The handicapped people are getting violent, which is funny unto itself, and it would get a few chuckles. The audience would be mortified. I said, so they changed it to disabled, and I said, but I said, I guess a few of us were still getting upset, and so you changed. And I asked them, do you know what? Oh, then it became physically challenged. See, all of these terms, so we wouldn't offend them. And then that only lasted a while. And I asked the audience, what do you think? What do we do now? And I said, well, let me tell you, the word is adaptive. It's adaptive skiing. So we don't have a clue what that means. So I'm just telling you, you're safe for a little while before we start to loot and burn the cities again. And so then I do a thing about, think of the concept. People thought it might be a fun idea to take people without arms and legs and people in wheelchairs, deaf and blind, people with, Stephen Hawking's disease and everything, and then take them up to an ice-cold mountain in the middle of January and put some skis on their feet and push them off and see how they do.
Oh, geez.
And all of a sudden, I'm starting to get a few chuckles. People are mortified. Well, by the time I got toward the act, people are crying. They're laughing so hard. But with their hands over their mouths, because they can't.
They're shocked
too. They can't believe they're laughing at the insanity of what I'm saying. Yeah. But again, it's my intention of saying, come on, folks, I can stand up here and make fun of myself, and you guys can either join in and see why do we have these labels.
Well, I mean, you're an educated man enough to see that stuff. I mean, tell us a little bit about your education. I know you're a student, and every time I do speak with you, I learn something new. That's why I enjoy having you on my shows when I do have you. But I mean, well, what is your education like? How far did you go in school?
Well, again, I went to, I wanted to go to. I think again, fate plays a part in my education. I wanted to go to UMass, and instead I didn't make it. So I ended up at Stonehill. And even though I didn't appreciate it at the time, at Stonehill they had two requirements you had to take every single semester. You had to take a philosophy course and a theology course. Courses in which you had to think. We had to take courses in logic, courses in rhetoric, mathematics, etc. Think. And we had to read the classics. We had to read Aristotle and Plato and Aquinas. And so I slowly, that kind of thing forced you to become analytic and think and creative. And after that, I gravitated toward economics, and I went to the University of Connecticut. I got a master's degree in economics, and economics is a social science. So for me, it's almost impossible not to look. And any good comic has to be. The thing that's amazing about comics, this has only occurred to me in the past couple of years. Comics are born. Comics, we're cursed in a very cool way, because we can see, I didn't realize this, we can see what the rest can't. And because it's so easy for us to see what the rest can't, we don't appreciate it.
The way we look at things is different than the normal person, right?
They can't do it. So when I see a comic doing observational stuff like, say, Seinfeld or Louis or somebody else, for me, I hear it and I go, that's not funny. I mean, everybody knows that. But everybody doesn't know that.
Robin Williams was good like that, too, yeah.
So to comic, it's like, that's not funny. But to the lay people, they're going, oh my God, that's hysterical. I didn't even look at that.
The obvious is not the obvious to them, right?
We're cursed. And here's the other thing. Since I've been, I have a cartoon property, and it's based on fairy tales. The characters are beans, and they're descendants of Jack and the Beanstalk, etc. So I'm writing these novels and these skits and bits where these characters interact with other fairy tale characters. And then you start to realize that throughout history, especially the kings and queens, at every court there was a what?
A jester?
A court jester. And what I mean, this is humanity expressing it, knowing that here's the king and queen.
You got to make the king laugh.
With a royal court, and the king wants a jester. Why does he want the jester?
Laughter is the best medicine.
He wants the jester to make fun of everybody in the court.
Right.
He wants them to take them down a peg. He doesn't want people getting too high on their high and mighty.
On the pedestal, right.
So the jester's always telling the rest of the people, hey, you don't have, that's a pretty shitty shirt you got on there, or where'd you get her, where'd you get him? And everybody pokes fun, and everybody is able to laugh at themselves, and you can't get too high and mighty. That's the beauty of comedy, isn't it?
Right.
And so we've existed, our archetype, if you want to talk about it, our archetype has existed since time began, since stories started to begin. Oh,
sure. Laughter's part of humanity, right. Yeah. You always need a laughter.
And society appreciated us and looked at it and said, these are not only funny people, they're truth sayers. They're telling the truth. So
Joan Rivers said she made her living on saying what everybody else was thinking, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we have the nuts to do it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a really challenging time. There's so much of the politics and everything of the day is going that. So when you ask me the question about my education, so I'm trained to think, for 4 years, theology and sociology, and not only did they were requirements, I started to take more and more courses that made me think and analyze. Now throw social science in there, where you understand any variable will affect society throughout the whole curve, whether it's an economic or political system, or a new fashion, a new moray. You're going to see that trickle all the way through society and create, for example, what we have today. I mean, there are forces that made this society what it is today, ways of thinking.
Right.
So I think that all of that helped me,
see the world differently. Yeah, I mean, education's power. The more educated you are, then the different things you can think of on any situation.
Right. You ask questions. Well, how did it get this way? And then you start going back and back and back, and you go, oh,
analyze everything.
This is the point where things, thought is probably the most powerful force in the universe.
Oh, sure.
People's thought.
Educated man's a powerful man, that's for sure. Well, you're also a world traveler.
Right, and what you decide, what enters your mind as a thought, eventually becomes action. I mean, you say, well, to the person who says, I want to be a comedian. Well, they got to get that thought. And if they start to work on that, they're going to get there.
Oh, sure.
I mean, in the two examples I talked about, Louis C.K. and Bill Burr, geniuses for not having the raw talent at the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
But working and working and working.
I've seen a lot of young comics quit after an open mic. I didn't get any laughs. I can't do this. Goodbye. It's like, well, no, you got to get over that. You don't realize.
There's a great book called Grit. And in the book, the author says, it's not the smart person who makes it all the time. It's not the person with the most talent. But over and over again, it's always the person with grit. The person who will take the setbacks, that will get pushed down, but keeps coming back.
Babe Ruth said, tough to beat a man who never gives up.
That's right.
That's what it takes.
When it's funny, one of the things that made some major shift, and I hope that this benefits comics, is, and I can, it's great to have you as a sounding board on this. When I worked in a flower shop when I was a kid, and the guy also owned a bar room. And he said one day, I want you to mind the shop because I got to go down and interview some barmen about, and he said, so he came back. I said, did you pick somebody? He goes, no. He says, I didn't even. I said, well, did he make you a drink? He says, no, that didn't even happen. He said, I watched him pick up a bottle, and I saw by the way he picked up the bottle, he wasn't a true bartender. And I said, you knew that just by the way he picked up a bottle? Okay, so now I'm going to ask you. You've been obviously a ton of open mics. As soon as you see the comic pick up a mic, do you know if he's good or not?
Yeah, you can tell by someone's demeanor, definitely. Yeah, within the few seconds whether they got it or not. Yeah.
Even before a word comes out of their mouth.
Yeah.
So, that's part of the expression, that comes through the craft. So, if you get up on stage the first night, you don't pick the mic up the way you do after being on stage 100
Right,
nights, or
yeah.
after 35 years. It's an unconscious move. But the guy who's scared stiff now, if he fails and he says, I'm not going to do that again, well, he didn't have the grit. He doesn't deserve to be a comic.
True
you got to get your nose. What's that great expression from Teddy Roosevelt? It's the man in the arena. It's the guy who gets his nose bloodied and gets back up and continues the fight. And you're right. Everybody else thinks, I can make my friends laugh. Well, Jay Leno said it best. He goes, the life of a comedian is this. A comedian spends the rest of his life trying to be as funny as the second before he stepped on stage.
Right.
Because before he stepped on stage, he was a hot ticket to everybody in his circle.
Yeah.
He made all his friends, people on the street, but it's a totally different
outside
game.
of your circle then, right.
When you get on stage. So here's the thing. When the guy picks up the mic and you tell right away that he's afraid, this is not a real comedian. What is obvious about every single open micer, probably all the way up until they start to become a middle act, you can see it in everything they do. And I'm going to help you out with this.
It's all scripted, I notice, It's all scripted, When you can loosen up and just be yourself, that's when you find your niche,
Yeah.
All these young guys, it's word for word what they got wrote down.
Right. What is every neophyte, what is every open micer first concerned with? What are they obsessed with when they go into comedy? They want to what? Laughs.
Yeah.
They want to get them. That's the whole thing. They're living to get a laugh, to receive a laugh. Okay, and that's the downfall right there, because they don't go there with an attitude of giving laughs. Because when you go there and you want to get laughs, who has all the power?
That's you. You want to give it to the audience. Yeah.
The audience. If your intention is to get a laugh, who has the power?
The audience, whether they're laughing or not, right? Yeah, all right,
the audience has the power because you're begging them for a laugh.
Right.
Now, if you go, and this is what happened to me, all of a sudden I started to realize, wait a minute, I'm going at this wrong. Because if I didn't get a laugh, I got nervous. And you can see
most young comics do, sure, yeah. You don't get a laugh.
When a comedian's not getting laughs, he's running. He's talking faster. He's sweating. He's moving. He's gulping. He can't think. It's like a boxer getting punched in the head a million times. He's dizzy. Because why? Because the audience has all the power. He's given the audience to show his worth. The only way he has worth is if the audience laughs. Now, take a guy who gets up. I started to shift and say, I'm not going to go there to get laughs. I'm going to go there to give them. And I hope the audience likes them. But if they don't, it's not my problem.
Right. That's when I started to do well. I was like, I wasn't getting laughs, and it's like I was trying to be the person I thought they wanted me to be. I was like, tonight I'm just going to make myself laugh. And that's when they started to laugh with me, when I just tried to make myself laugh.
Exactly. And all of a sudden, everything changed. And they can sense it. They can see the confidence. They can't get you riled. The worst thing you can do it's like the law of the jungle. I mean, as soon as that lion or that tiger sees a weak animal, he goes after it. And that's just nature.
Yeah.
And the same thing with a crowd. They see the comic turning frightened, they're going to devour them.
You just got to outwork everybody and get better. Don't give up your first night, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, and shift the emphasis. The emphasis is not on getting laughs. The emphasis is to go there and give people laughter.
Right.
Give them a good time. I mean, as tough as this business has been, and it saddens me to see the conditions it's in right now, but there have been times when, and it's always when I don't want to go out that night for whatever reason, that a miracle will happen. And I remember one New Year's Eve, I didn't want to go out because New Year's Eve is tough. A lot of people are drunk and whatever.
Right.
But the show went beyond my expectations.
It's one of the biggest nights in comedy, though. Yeah, New Year's Eve. That's a big one in comedy. Yeah.
Yeah, and so a woman comes up to me and says, "I want to thank you." I said, "Well," she says, "You were great." I said, "Well, thank you." She goes, No. She said, "I have to tell you something. I haven't laughed in 8 years.
Oh, gee.
This is the first time in 8 years that I have truly laughed." She says, "I giggled and I smiled in 8 years." She says, "But 8 years ago, they murdered my son. And
Not
I
much
haven't
to laugh
laughed
about
my
after that.
8-year-old
Yeah.
son. And I haven't laughed in 8 years. Tonight, you made me laugh."
You can't put a price
Now,
on that.
the woman is hugging me and crying, and I'm at the same time I'm crying back.
Right.
And she says, "They burned his body."
Oh, gee.
And this is the first time I have laughed. What kind of a gift is that to have?
Yeah, to give somebody, right.
That's what we are endowed with. That's the blessing that comes to comedians, that we can take somebody in that depressed state and touch them in a way that brings them joy.
That's why they say laughter is the best medicine. I mean, if you give somebody something to laugh about, it'll help you through some tough times. I mean, yeah, I was going through a divorce, and my son was getting caught in the middle. It was tearing me apart, and I found through comedy, you know. I mean, I chose to laugh about the situation rather than let it drive me crazy. And
exactly.
Thank God comedy was there. I don't know if I'd have made
I
it.
started doing jokes about it. And in fact, that was my thing. You know, I had a magic bag that was this grubby old bag, and I'd get on stage. I said, "Oh, finally, I'm going through a divorce." And I'd hold up this grubby bag, and I'd look at there and I'd go, "This is the settlement." And people would die. And I didn't mean it to be funny. I meant it to be funny, but it was the
truth, too. Sometimes the truth is funny, right? Yeah, all right.
You know,
well,
but
you say you started in Boston, you said, right? That was where you started comedy?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And you have to laugh at your own pain. I mean, come on, folks. You
It's the only way you make it through it is if you lay. Oh yeah, it'll eat you apart if you don't laugh about it. But I know you've traveled the world. What are some of the more fun spots that you traveled to that you've either done comedy
to?
to?
You know, when I look, I turned 73 a while back, and I look back on my life, and don't forget that 60 years ago it could have been over for me, like it was for those other 95 kids.
Right.
And I look at the way that I got to live and the things I got to do and the people imagine. I mean, the gifts that came along were ridiculous. Here I am, and I'm a headliner in Boston. I'm not a Galvin, I'm not a Sweeney, I'm not a Lenny, but I did a decent job.
Yeah.
I made a lot of people laugh. But here I am, amazing things happened. Again, destiny. I got to open for Henny Youngman. Now today, most comics don't know it, but he was the forerunner of
King of the one-liners, they called him.
Yeah, boom, 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 boom.
The original one-liner guy, yeah, one right after another.
And he was a master. I opened for him when he was 87 years old, and he was as quick and as clever as he had ever been. And I opened for Nick, put me in 3 of the venues that he was there, and so I got to show him around for 3 weeks.
Really?
And and at the end, I could do his act. I saw it so many times, and he said to me one night, he says, "Don't ever give this up." He said, "People are going to try to take this from you." And I know what he was talking about, because there were a lot of relationships I got into, and it would start with, "You really have to do that anymore."
Oh, yeah.
So he said to me, "Don't ever let anybody take this from you.
You got to choose. It's either me or comedy. What's your choice?"
Yeah,
comedy.
Exactly.
See ya.
And he said to me, they asked me how I lost my leg, and I told him, and he said, "Well," he says, "you got guts, kid." And I said, oh, thank you very much. He goes, yeah, I know you got guts. I said, no. He goes, I saw your act.
That'll do it. It tells who you are. I mean, your act says who you are. Tell more about a comic in their act than you can talking to them outside of it, yeah.
Right, and then I ended up opening for Phyllis Diller, and it was like, oh my God, I saw this woman on TV as a kid.
Some legends, yeah.
Yeah, and I get in her dressing room, and she shares this beautiful wisdom with me about, staying positive and, staying with it. And she says to me, I'm going to send you a book called The Magic of Believing. And she did.
She did, wow.
It was stellar.
It wasn't a line, she remembered.
Yeah, the next week I go to the mail, and there's the book signed and autographed by her, along with a picture of her signed and autographed. And I go, how does this happen? And I get to open for the Smothers Brothers.
They were the original got banned from TV.
Another, right, because they were offensive.
Yeah, right, they were offensive.
And, as I hang out with them, they told a great story. I worked with them in a theater in New Hampshire, and I got to hang out with them before we were in the green room, and so we had a great conversation about the business, etc. And I watched their act, and I was ready to leave. They watched me, which was the other thing. I was like, oh my God, this is the Smothers Brothers watching me. And so I went backstage. I was going to leave, but I said, I got to go back and thank them. And I walked in, and I hope for all the young comics and comics who haven't made it, you really listen to this, because this is the truth. I said to them, hey guys, hey Tom, hey Dick, I just came back to thank you. And I said, for what? I said, I noticed something about the different class of comedians, the different ranking of comedians. I said, always, when I work with the creme de la creme, with the best, with the stars, always, you guys treat me with respect. That does not happen on most levels of comedy. In fact, it's the opposite what happens. People are jealous. People will backstab you. People, it's just not the same. I said, but you guys give encouragement. You respect me as a pro. And I said, so I want to thank you for that. And so Tommy says to me, so who would you work with? Well, I said, I worked with Henny Youngman. I worked with a few there, Pat Cooper, and I go with that. And I said, I worked with Phyllis Diller. And Tommy said, Phyllis? You worked with Phyllis? I goes, yeah. He goes, oh my God. He goes, when we were coming up, she was one of our favorite acts. And he says, in fact, one night, he says, we were working in a green room like this, and she's getting changed. And I'm telling you, Tom, all that stuff with the wigs and everything, she's a good-looking woman. And she's sitting there in a brown pants. And I looked over and I said, Phyllis, not for nothing, but I'd love to screw you. And imagine doing that today with all of the Me Too.
Well, you'd be brought up on charges if you said something like that now.
Exactly. So she said to him, oh, Tommy, that's so nice. She says, but Tommy, you got to remember, I'm a celebrity right now, and I'm also a wife and a mother. If this ever got out, she says, I can't go around screwing every Tom, Dick, and Harry.
Of course.
Genius.
Even off stage, she still had it, right?
Oh my God,
You were the Tom and the Tom, Dick, and Harry.
But see, there's one of the elements of greatness, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the greats never turn it off. They don't go on stage and turn it. You never turn it off. It's who you are, yeah.
Right, but to be great, to be kind.
Yeah, the kids don't. I try to tell the kids, please and thank you will take a lot further than you owe me and I'm entitled, and they don't get that. It's like, they're entitled. You owe me something. You're supposed to book me. I don't owe you nothing. I book a lot of shows, and I get a lot of. You book me, I'm the next hotshot comic. Okay, you keep thinking that, yeah. I'll book somebody who tells me thank you. Okay, that's what I'll book.
And these are, these are pleasantries. These are manners. This is what makes us human. And those people don't have a shattered ego. They've been through it. They are great.
I think we get some mutual friends. Actually, on the cooking show, I had Tom Cotter and Carrie Louise, and I was so nervous about having them in, and they really just came in and talked to me, like an everyday guy, and I thought that was cool. They didn't forget where they came from, that they come down, Tom's a big star now in America's Got Talent. He did my tiny cooking show in Leominster, Mass, and I thought that was cool. I told him that too. Thank you for doing this. You didn't forget where you came from.
Oh, yeah. Again, he's a great, he's been to the top, and he's always been that way. He's a great human. And this is what, again, when you operate out of fear, and you think of everything as competition, and you're waiting, you got to get instead of give.
Right.
You're in trouble. You're in trouble.
Yeah.
Another scene happened to me one night. I didn't want to go out. It was a rainy night. I had to travel to Hartford. The money wasn't good, and the first act was brutal. And I said, "What am I doing here?" I was in the top floor of some restaurant, and whatever, I got up, and all of a sudden something happened in the room, and it became magical. It just became so much fun. And I was having a great time. And I got through, and I was standing by the door as people were exiting, and a woman, she had on a Hell's Angels Harley Davidson jacket.
Tough
and
woman.
She looked the part.
Woman that could kick your ass. That's the kind of woman.
She says to me, "You just erased 3 years of misery."
Oh, jeez. Glad to help, all right.
But, that's the gift we have.
Yeah, every night's day. Well, if it's the same night over and over, it wouldn't be any fun. That's half the fun of comedy is every night's different. You don't know what you're walking into,
Well, I look at the audience as a potential pool of dolphins, playful dolphins.
Right.
And I love nothing more than have something happen in the audience where somebody makes a comment to me or something, and I can now deviate from my routine, and we can play. They can say something to me, I can say something back. I can point out something, they can point, and it becomes a game, not of being offended, but of play.
Playing with the crowd, sure. Play with each other.
Yeah, you can work with the crowd, and everybody is howling over things. We are, in that moment, creating, both of us, together. It's like watching the wave at a game, professional sporting game. It's people playing, having fun, and those are the greatest times.
Those are the big moments. Yeah. Well, we talked about where you started. We talked about where you've been. Let's talk about where you're going. I know you are the CEO producing books, toys, and animated films. I believe it's called Beantown Pals. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's another one of those destiny things that happened. I retired. I was fortunate enough to retire from the business world at the age of 52 and was going to do nothing but fish for the rest of my life.
Good plan.
And was financially set. And along the way, I was doing corporate speaking. I was making a ton of money doing corporate speaking with some humor injected.
Right.
Way more than I could ever receive as a comic. And so I decided to write a book because if you have a book, it gives you more credibility, etc. And I started to write my autobiography. And the computer crashed, and it was a scene right out of The Matrix. In those days, if your computer crashed, you went to the yellow pages, you called some computer repair place, and the guy showed up, and he was a retired technician from Raytheon or something, and he comes in, and he's got a dirty leather jacket, and he's smoking a cigarette, he's got a Dunkin' Donuts in his hand, and he takes your computer, and you're thinking, oh my God, am I ever going to see this thing again? My life is in there. And so I come out, and the computer just crashed, and around the light bulb was one of those little tear-off computer repair things.
Yeah.
So I call the number. The guy shows up, and he's about 22 years old. He's got a black leather jacket. He's handsome as hell. And you look at him, you go, this is a hacker. This is the guy I want.
He'll have all your information before you know it.
Yeah, he's a gunman. This guy's a hitman. And so we started talking, and the next thing, one thing leads to another, we start this company that we're going to do some marketing and other things. And along the way, we decide to, again, I was living, people used to say to me, did you ever see Modern Family, or did you ever see Seinfeld? I go, you got to understand something. I'm living in Boston. I'm working 5 or 6 nights a week with comics. I said, I live Seinfeld. I said, every episode that I see with him, the stuff that happens to me every single day, hanging around with Bobby Seibel and all these characters, the situations we got into ourselves with drop dead, crazy. So we decided to start putting these on tape, and then we decided to make it an animation because one of the gals that was working for him in his business had majored in it. And so we went down that path. And along the way, the animator I hire walks in. Think of this in Destiny. Most of our characters were vegetables. And he said, hey, man, he was pretty heavy into marijuana. And he says, hey, man, I thought of a character last night, man. I thought of the Boston Baked Bean, man. And I stood and looked at him and I went, what did you say? And he goes, Boston Baked Bean, man. Think of that as a character. And I went, oh my God. In 375 years of Boston being known as Beantown, I had never seen a character called the Boston Baked Bean.
Right.
I immediately went down to a patent lawyer and copyrighted and trademarked it. And then put together a mascot.
You never know where a good idea is going to come from. You got a genius idea from a pothead. That's great.
Yeah, and so we started doing cartoons based on the fact that he was a baked bean, man. He was stoned all the time. And one of the characters was a martini olive. It was kind of like Friends or like Cheers that always needed a bar. And so we created these hysterical cartoons. And then I needed more money to do it. So I said, well, wait a minute. Let's get a mascot made. Again, this is all serendipity. This is all happening by it.
Right.
So I get a mascot made, and I write a letter to Mayor Menino and said, hey, listen, it was the 375th birthday of Boston. I said, why don't we, I got the Boston Baked Bean as a character on a mascot. And I didn't even have it at the time. I was thinking about it, so we photoshopped this bean standing next to Menino. And I sent it off to the city hall, and everybody's working for me. He's in their 20s. He goes, you can't do that. I go, well, that's the mayor. I said, that's where you start. You start at the top.
Right.
So the next time, nothing happens for about 8 or 9 weeks. I go, okay, whatever. Boom. They call me up. You better check that email. And I go, what? You just got a letter from Menino. He wants that bean in the parade.
You got notice. There you go.
So now I got to hope that the mascot comes in time.
All right.
We build the float. We go down and we do a press conference with Menino. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
I mean, we come up with this crazy idea. We go down with the mascot.
What's the worst he was going to say? No, right? I mean, don't hurt to try. Or worst he'd tell you is no.
You know, he could have just said, this is stupid. But he saw the marketing potential of a mascot for the city.
Right.
And so his aides are sitting there going, what the hell is that thing? We're going, that's a mascot. Get it out of here. And we're going, no, we got a letter. The mayor wants to see it. Like, you know, and so, all right, well, don't cut that line. There was all kinds of cameras there. All the TV stations with it.
Oh, boy.
So Menino, my buddy puts on the mascot. Menino sees it and waves us over and puts us right beside him as he's doing this.
Free advertisement for you.
Yeah, and so, but when he leaves, now this is when it went insane. When everybody cleared out, we were downtown Boston. All of a sudden, in seconds, this mascot is mauled. People can't wait to touch it.
Get a picture with it.
Pictures with it. And I went, oh my God. Now, going back to comedy, I started to learn sitting in those clubs who, and you can attest to this too, you know immediately when somebody's got the it factor.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
There's certain guys who have the it factor. I mean, let's face it, nobody had the it factor, probably never has had since Elvis. Elvis had the it factor. It was the epitome. But other people have, you know, I saw people who didn't have it. I saw them get it. I saw Dennis Leary get it. In fact, Dennis was one of the worst comedians that ever worked around. And then he went to London.
Bill Hickson could dispute that, but okay.
Yeah, he went to London and came back. And so I asked Dominic Ventry, who was running Knicks at the time. I said, what's the order tonight? He said, well, it's this guy, then Dennis, then you. And I laughed because all my friends from high school would come in to see me. I go, this is going to be easy. Huh? he had just created that No Cure for Cancer thing.
Right.
And he got up, and I was shocked. He got the it factor. He had confidence. He was brash. He crushed that room like I'd never seen it. And I had to get up and follow him, and I bombed.
Tough night, yeah, tough to follow hot act.
People have an it factor. And when I saw people maul this bean, I said, oh my God, we've got an it factor.
That happened to me with the TV show. I had a mascot called Bobo Banana. He did food reviews. We cut to him, and we did this big thing down in Leominster about the Comedy Kitchen TV show I had. Everybody went running up to the banana to get a picture with him, and nobody came up to me. I'm like, I'm the star of the show. The banana's getting all the credit here. What the heck, man? Nobody wanted a picture with me. They wanted the banana.
Right. So what we did then was we had to raise revenue, so I started making souvenirs. We made plush toys. We made T-shirts.
So if people want to check it out, do you have a website or something? Where would the listeners go to check it out if they wanted to see the
www.beantownpal, all one word, Beantown Pals, BEANTOWN pals.com. And all of a sudden, I decided I want an actual hard plastic toy, kind of a collectible. And by serendipity, we find a guy to do it. We create it, and all of a sudden, these toys go viral.
Really?
Kids couldn't get. We created over 180 different characters. It was fascinating. Kurt Schilling wanted to buy us at the time. We were courting all kinds of investors. We were raising tons of money. It looked like it was going to happen, and in 2008, it kind of crashed. But in the meantime,
you hit your peak, yeah.
But in the meantime, we had made an incredible impression on the city and on kids.
They say when you hit the top, there's only one direction to go, and that's down. But at least you hit the top, I mean.
Well, yeah, but then it was interesting because then I was out of money and I couldn't do the production that we wanted. I mean, it's hard to, as determined as you can be.
A budget counts for sure. Yep.
Sometimes it's hard to compete with a worldwide catastrophe like a 2008 recession or COVID. Right. They will humble you
real quick. Yeah, real quick. Yeah.
So anyway, here I am without money. So I started doing podcasts myself, and one day I was goofing around. We had this crazy concept of doing a comedy on podcast, and I put the phone down, and a voice said to me, like always happens in my life, a voice shows up at the right time doing it. It says, "Stupid, do a kids radio show." And I'm like, huh? And so now, do you know Tammy Cooler?
Yeah, I know Tammy. Yeah. Up in Maine.
Yeah, okay. So Tammy was a customer. She had a secondhand children's store, and she was a customer of our toys.
Oh.
She called me up from time to go, Tom, in 20 years of owning a kid shop, I have never seen what I'm witnessing. These kids are on the floor wrestling over this toy.
Really?
And she says, there's something about this toy. I said, I know, we hear it all the time. So anyway, Tammy left show business for about 5 years to work on her family and her business. She's an amazing entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So one night we're at a show. I hadn't seen her in 5 years, and she asked me, ironically, about what routine she wants to do. She said her father was illiterate, and yet he used to read her bedtime stories, but he always got the characters confused. And so he would point to the pictures, but he'd put Little Red Riding Hood in with the Three Pigs or with Cinderella. And so she says, I'm thinking of doing it as a routine. I said, go ahead, do it. And well, it killed. So we started the conversation again. And then one day I said to her, she's an amazing storyteller and hysterical. And so I put together 30 videos of her talking about her life. And so she booked me to do a show with her one night. And on the way to the show, she says to me, I said, hey, Tammy, I had a weird thing came to me the other day. I said, about doing a kids radio show. You want to do it? She says, what about? I said, we'll do it about the beans. She says, well, what are the characters? So I explained the characters to her. I said, well, Bucky works in the garage, and he's a race car driver, and Betty worked in a soda shop. It's very American graffiti, very 50s. And she looks at me. Her husband's pumping gas, right? She goes, well, you want to do one? And I go, me now? She goes, yeah. That's okay. Let me, get the phone. So I put the voice recording on the phone, and we start. And she said, well, what's the premise? I said, well, Bucky's coming over to get to the Double Dip, which was the name of the soda shop. He's coming over to get his favorite ice cream. And he's asked you not to share the secret of the favorite ice cream, but you're selling it. And she goes, okay, ready to go? I said, okay. And so I start. Hey, Betty, oh, Bucky, she answers the phone. Double Dip, this is Betty speaking. And I go, hey, Betty, this is Bucky. I'm off from work. I'm going to come over. I just want to oh, Bucky, you better hurry up over here because you know that ice cream you told me about, the one that not to share with anybody, your favorite? Yeah, Betty, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, well, you better get over here fast because it's going fast. What do you mean it's going fast? Well, I'm selling it. But Betty, I asked you not to sell it. No, Bucky, I know why you asked me not to sell it because it's going like crazy. Everybody like, no, Bucky, I can't talk to you. Now, this is all improv. All.
Off the top of your head. Oh, wow.
This is nothing is scripted. She goes, oh, Bucky, this is how much of a genius she is. Bucky, I can't talk to you right now. Somebody's at the window.
one of those magical moments. You never know when they strike.
Yeah, so Bucky goes into, I can't believe she's selling my ice cream. What I told her not, it's my favorite ice cream. This is what I told her not to sell my ice cream. She'll have my ice cream. Comes, hey, Bucky, she said, I want to tell you, Rocky said she really likes your ice cream. I go, what, Rocky? Rocky? I said, wait a minute. Rocky the rock star or Rocky the race car driver? Rocky the race car driver. You mean you just sold my ice cream to the guy I'm racing against tomorrow? She goes, oh, no, Bucky, I didn't. I said, you just told me. She says, no, I didn't sell it to him. I gave it to him.
Oh, okay.
So, again, 5 minutes of improv, nonstop,
right,
while her husband's pumping gas. We finish it, and I look at her, and we're in horror. We look at each other and go, what the hell was that?
Magic just happened, right?
Magic just happened. In fact, it was funny at the end. She keeps selling the ice cream, and he's telling her, Betty, the reason I shared that with you was because I trusted you. I have a very close relationship with you. I consider you my friend, and I would never share that secret with anybody else. And I trusted you with my secret, and here you are selling it. So she says to me, Bucky, I hate to tell you this, but your ice cream's all gone.
Now, if they go to this website, they can see all these episodes you've done, right? People can watch them?
So he says to her, she says, are you coming over? And I goes, no, I don't think so now. And it's funny because I modeled Bucky after Don Gavin. And so she said, oh, Bucky, where are you going? I said, I think I'll go over to Kim's. Why are you going to Kim's? Well, Kim always keeps a gallon of my favorite ice cream in the freezer.
You're out, Kim's in. All right.
So, anyway, long story short, in about 2 years, another serendipitous thing, she was doing these comedy rap videos that were hysterical. And so she had found a sound engineer. So we walk into the sound engineer. We said, we got some ideas. And he goes, I don't know about this. He goes, I record music. I don't record skits. And so I said, well, all we need you to do, we'll do the skits. You just got to put the sound effects in because we want to turn these into cartoons. And so for 5 years, it got so frightening that Tammy and I, it was for the first time in a long time, I got afraid because we had latched onto something that we really weren't in control of.
Right.
And we didn't know what we were doing, but it was happening.
Where's it going?
So we're going to the studio for 2 hours, and we create 5 of these hysterical, flawless stories without any writing, just the premise. And Tammy turned to me, and I'm gonna give this part a lot of credence, and I hope this helps out everybody who's listening to this when you talk about creativity. I just listened to Smokey Robinson's. He just came out with a little memoir on Audible, and I recommend everybody listen to it because it's great history. And he talks about being friends with Marvin Gaye. And when Marvin Gaye was creating the album, What's Going On, he called up Marvin and asked him, how's it going? And Marvin said to him, I don't know how to say this to you, Smokey. He says, but God writing this album. And Smokey says, I believe them. He says, because the content that was on that album, it could only come from God. It was so amazing. And it's still pertinent today. Right. Well, Tammy and I looked at each other after a couple of these sessions, and she said to me, you know that this stuff is coming from God, don't you? Right. And I said, Tammy, there's no other way of explaining it.
Is that magic, yeah?
So if they go to the site, they can hear the stories. And
so how many episodes have you done?
What's that?
How many episodes are there?
We have 14 hours of comedic content ready to be animated.
So you can keep people busy for a while.
Plus the animations. I converted a few of them to animations.
Okay.
And they're hysterical. I mean, they're just this insane romp. And you know what? You know what it is? It's Desi and Lucy. It's Jackie Gleason and Audrey Meadows and the Honeymooners. It's
all in one.
Yeah, you know what it really is? It's Kermit and Miss Piggy.
Yeah, I mean, we all grew up on Sesame Street, then Mr. Rogers came along. And I stump a lot of people on this. Did you know George Carlin, he did the voice of Thomas the Tank Engine? So.
All right, now you've hit magic.
There you go. Magic. You know, yeah.
The whole thing was magic with the Beans. Guess who showed up along the way? A guy named Rick Sigelko. Rick Sigelko. We went down to New York to get money from capital investors for the project, and one of the guys we were pitching to brought in Rick Sigelko to shoot us down. To, in a polite way, say this won't work.
Right.
Rick Sigelko is the guy that brought Thomas the Train from England to America and hired George Carlin and hired Ringo and won 8 Emmys for Thomas the Tank Engine.
Right.
He's present at this meeting. We lay out the toys, we lay out the concept, and he says, you know, your storyline is wrong, this, that, the other thing. And then we pack up, and we figure, oh, too bad, it didn't work. All of a sudden, Rick Sigelko we're packing up, and Rick Sigelko's at the door. This is a guy that won 8 Emmys, hanging out with Carlin and Ringo to produce Thomas the Tank Engine, which is what they call an evergreen, an icon. He says, can I talk to you guys? We goes, yeah. He sits down and he looks at the toys and he looks at us. He goes, I can make this bigger than Thomas the Train. Can I have a job? And we said, we don't have any money. And he goes, I don't care. I don't care.
Right.
And he worked with us for 2 years and brought us on an amazing ride. We were in front of Hasbro, and we got in front of MTV, Nickelodeon. We got in front of, like, Viacom.
Really?
It's just, I'm so glad I'm able to document this on this. But magic happened, and we're still working on it. You know, I'm still a believer. I still think the time is coming.
Yeah.
And, but in the meantime, it doesn't matter because it's so damn much fun.
Yeah, as long as you're having fun, yeah. But yeah, that's your success right there. The journey is half the fun is making the trip. Yeah.
You know, and we talked about Bill Burr. I didn't know this, but Bill Burr has an animation on, I think it's HBO, Netflix, one or the other. And so I'm trying to say to comics and everybody who's got any modicum of comedic ability, don't just look at stand-up as the be-all and end-all. It's one of the ways to express yourself.
It's
but
a
look
window
for
opening.
Whether it's a comic strip or it's, you know, find an illustrator and put your ideas on and create a comic book character or something. But there's so many ways today. Or you do your YouTube stuff.
Sure.
Do men in the street interviews. Do whatever comes to you, to your instincts. Do it, because you just never know where it's going to go.
A lot of creative windows out there. Thomas, it has been a pleasure having you on the show. You're a man of many minds.
This was seamless and wonderful, and I can't wait to share this.
Yeah, we're coming on 2 hours here, but it's always a joy taking a trip into your mind because you've seen it all, you've done it all, and you've been active. I'll say this. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I'm a father's rights activist. That's what I do in comedy is I try to spread awareness for father's rights. And when I was checking out your website, you went on and you talked about your comedy. You talked about the Beantown Pal characters, the voiceover work, the author, the corporate speaking. And I noticed you put in there you were a good father. Well, so let's leave it off on that note. Why did you choose to put in there that you were a good father?
Well, I mean, listen, I've been a father to two different families, and along the way, some great girlfriends who had great kids that adopted me as their father. I mean, come on. What's in a time when it seems like the American family is under attack, and the traditional American family anyway. What better thing can you do in life than to father a couple of great kids?
Puts everything else in perspective, don't it?
Well, it's a legacy, isn't it? You talked about your child and how you hated to see him ripped apart by a divorce.
Right.
But I mean, this is what we leave, isn't it? If you can leave a couple of responsible, giving individuals, creative people on the planet, what better thing can you do?
That's it. Leave it off on that. You're an inspirational guy, Thomas. Thank you for being on.
Dennis, I got to tell you something. Also as a podcaster, and I feel like a pretty good interviewer, you were impeccable, my friend. You did a great job.
Well, thank you very much, and I hope to keep it going. And if guys like you are nice enough to keep coming on, then who knows what I can build with the podcast. I'm having fun, so as long as I'm having fun, I'll keep doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. Be well. We'll talk soon, okay?
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, bye-bye. Comedian Thomas Hayes, I guess you can't call him a comedian, man. He's done it all, okay? And inspirational guy. He does inspirational speaking, and you found out why in this podcast, because, man, he'll pick you up and make you want to do amazing things, and go out and do them. Don't let anybody tell you can't do them. People are going to kick you down. When I started this podcast, they wanted to kick me down, and now I'm having some of the biggest names in Boston comedy come on. So don't let anybody tell you can't do it. You want to be a lover, you want to be a hater, choose to be a lover. That's what's going to get you ahead in life. This is Funny Like a Clown podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Wirth, and somebody's calling me back. Probably Tommy wants to know how it went, but yeah, man, comedy, and he mentioned, laughter is the best medicine. Keep people laughing. I'll keep you laughing. You keep me laughing. Everybody's laughing. Until next week, let's laugh. Good night.